Hold on, is that? All right. Now can you hear me okay? Okay, is it sound okay? There's no feedback or anything? Let's see, split screen, full, checking out all the different things access to. Okay, that one looks good. We can and we will. I don't remember what my question was, but they will.
I think they'll tell you if the feedback.
Cool. That works out. All right, how's everyone doing? Good, awesome. Enjoying boot camp? Yeah. What was yesterday? Yesterday's subjects. Awesome. So you all know how to debug now? No more bugs in your code? Pretty much. Okay, so what's today's lecture about? Objects. Exactly. What are objects? Anyone? What's an object? It's like a Python dictionary. Yeah? There's a lot of languages where people will say, yeah, like everything's an object in Python or JavaScript or Ruby. In JavaScript, no, there are actually differences between objects and what we call primitive types. So let's see, how am I going to work this? I've got my notes and code here. I'm going to put Slack in the middle, and I'm going to put terminal on this side. So I should be able to see if Victoria has any questions. Shrew, do you mind checking in with Victoria? So not everything is an object. We do have primitive types in JavaScript. What are the primitive types? String, number. Just reading off your thing. Undefined, null, Boolean. What was the other one? Symbol. What's a symbol? Yeah, we don't care about this right now. Just these ones. Okay. Strings, these are pretty simple, right? Just any bit of text. Numbers. Anything special about these numbers? Like we got normal numbers like 1, 2, 3. Can we have decimal numbers? Yeah? I guess that's kind of weird, whatever. We could have like 1.2. Could we have fractions? No, we'll convert it to a decimal. Yeah, so actually all numbers in JavaScript are floating point numbers. So even these 1, 2, 3, they're all floats. We just represent them as integers. JavaScript doesn't differentiate between integers and floats. Everything's just a float. Undefined. So undefined is a type. What are the values we can have for undefined? Kind of a trick question. Yeah, exactly. The type is undefined, the value is undefined. Same question for null. Type is null, the only value you have is null. For Boolean, there are 2 possible values. What are they? True or false, exactly. True or false. And symbols we don't care about right now. Cool. So these are the primitive types. These are not objects in JavaScript. So we'll be talking a little bit more about these primitive types as we talk about objects as well. But anyone have any questions about primitive types before we move on? We played around with them a decent amount. Yeah? OK. So see anything from Victoria? Nope. We use all these primitive types to actually represent the data that we have in JavaScript. If someone has, like if you have a person that you're trying to represent and they have a name, you're probably going to use a string. If you're trying to represent their age, you're probably going to use a number. To represent nothing, we actually have 2 different ways. We have undefined and null. If we need to represent some sort of Boolean, we have that Boolean value. So we use all of these primitive types to actually represent the data that we need. And this is all we need. We only need primitive types. We don't need anything else to represent the data. But we do have things called data structures. What is a data structure? In computer science, what is a data structure? A function? Maybe. Go ahead. Okay, so an example of a data structure, let's see, examples, would be an array. Yeah, absolutely. An array is a data structure. Yeah, data structures we use to structure a collection of data, right? Structure, meaning we store, organize, retrieve data. That's what we use data structures for. One example of that is an array. Everyone here has used an array, right? So we take data, we store it in an array. When data is stored in an array, it's organized in a specific order, right? And we can access each bit of data using its index. And then if we want to retrieve a bit of data out of the array, like I just said, we just access it using its index. What other examples of data structures have we used? Yeah, go ahead.
An object. I know an array is an object, but then there's the objects that are like equal curly braces and then have more data.
Objects, and like as an aside, how do I represent an aside in my markdown? I don't know. Aside. Arrays are objects, yeah. How long ago did I ask a question? Oh, okay, library. Is a library a data structure? No, a library is usually actually just a lot of behavior, not much data. Okay, so yeah, we've got arrays, we've got objects. Yeah, arrays are technically objects, functions are technically objects. But the way we're talking about objects today, as these key value pairs, which we'll get to in a second, definitely an array in that sense is a data structure, yeah. Different from an object, yeah. I think words are hard in the morning. Any other examples of data structures that we've seen in JavaScript? Variable's not a data structure. Functions could be data structures, but they don't really fit into this, how we're going to be looking at them today, so I'm going to leave them off the list. Also, functions are objects. Now, these are the main two we've seen so far. You might come across other ones in other languages and in JavaScript called like sets and maps, things like that. We haven't looked at these yet. So really, these should be the only two data structures that you'll be comfortable with for like the entire bootcamp, arrays and objects. So we've already played around with arrays, objects. Let's talk about objects. So the way we use objects, oh, just realized I have not plugged my laptop in and it will die if I don't plug it in. While I'm doing that, does anyone have any questions so far? Oh. Just 1 second. There's no way to plug it in. Maybe. Ah. Thank you. It helps when the instructor is unprepared that the students are prepared. Yeah, at least one student is prepared, then everything's fine. Okay. Objects. Objects are a big subject in most languages, especially JavaScript. At least for the first 4 weeks of bootcamp, we will only be concerned with using objects as key value pairs and creating objects using the object literal syntax. And that looks like that. Has anyone not seen that syntax yet? There we go, right there. Right? Yeah. You created object literals, right?
Oh, you're talking about the curly braces, or are you talking about the marking? Yeah, the marking.
Oh, I'm talking. This is Markdown. I'm just taking notes in Markdown. Yeah, no, I'm talking about the curly braces.
Okay, never mind.
Has anyone not used curly braces to create an object yet? Like. var obj equals that. No. The shaking head means... Yeah, exactly, right. So everyone has it at one time done. Yeah, okay, cool. That's just making sure. Okay. So this is called object literal syntax. Why is it called that? Literally creates an object. Object. Damn it. How do you spell literally? Look at that. I have many quirky facts. One of them, I'm just terrible at spelling, so you'll find spelling errors in all my work, all my notes and everything. Feel free to correct me as I go there. Literally creates an object. So we use this syntax, a new object is created. I will tell you right now, there are many, many, many ways of creating objects. You will see different ways of creating objects in documentation. Later on in the bootcamp, we'll be using those different ways. For now, all we care about is object literal. So this literally creates an object. An object is a set of key value pairs. Keys and values. So if we look at an example, maybe this object has some keys and values. Maybe a key would be, oh, I suck at examples. Someone give me a thing, a noun. Okay, let's do like a type of all right, so this is now a dog apparently. And the type is Labrador. Good enough spelling? Yeah, good enough. And like, wait, what did you say, color? Chocolate. Okay, yeah. So this is an example of using these key value pairs, right? The things to the left of the colon are the keys. The things to the right are the values. My text editor was yelling at me, so I spelled it right. So we have these key value pairs. Objects are key value pairs. Every key has a value. Every value has a key. This is quite different to how we think of arrays, where we just have a bunch of values and we access those values using indexes. Here we have a bunch of values, we access those values using keys. We store them using keys. So let's talk about some of the rules for an object. What is a valid key? What can a key be? Yeah, go ahead. Ooh, not quite. You can name and define like this, right? It has to be a string. What is a valid key? Any valid string is a key. Absolutely. What kind of... I put my computer to sleep. So does anyone else have the Macs with the touch bar? Yeah, right? Like you wanted the upgrade and you didn't really care about the touch bar, but they said, no, you have to have the touch bar if you want the upgrade. So you're like, fine, I'll take the touch bar. And you never use it, but you accidentally put your laptop to sleep occasionally during a lecture. You know what I'm talking about, right? Yeah. What can a value be in an object? Like it will be a characteristic of the thing that you're representing. In this case, maybe a dog. But what values can we use? What JavaScript values can we use as a object value? So? Okay, so we got any primitive or object. Pretty much encapsulates any type of value you might have in JavaScript. Yeah, so any value. What can the value be in an object? Any value. Sounds kind of dumb, but you know, it could be a number, it could be a string. Here we've just done strings. Could be booleans, null, undefined. Could be another object. Could be a symbol. Could be arrays, functions, whatever. Value can be any value in JavaScript. The type has, or the key has to be a valid string. Yes, exactly. Any valid string can be the key. Okay. So, maybe let's look at some examples. Does anyone have any questions before we move on? No? I'm going to call this file objects.js, and I'll check in with Victoria. They seem to be fine. I'm just going to verify with a thumbs up. Let's represent some data. Let's, like a dog, let's come up with another thing and we'll represent the data for that thing. That noun, I guess. Car. Cool. So what does a car have? Okay, so I'm gonna go car tires. Is that how you spell tires? I feel like that's not how you spell tires. But it's like how you spell it in Vancouver. British spell. No, you know. No, no. I was gonna say, you know how in Vancouver when you want to go and get like a coffee with milk, and they're like, no, no, we don't have milk. We have milk with a Y, and it's made from almonds and coconuts and stuff. So it's Vancouver tires. It's vegan and gluten free. Um, car tires. What would the value be for that? No, no. I just want to. What would the value be just for the tires, not for the entire car? So we could have a string that's like all season. All season. I don't know. It could have also been like a number, I guess. Could have been like 4 or 3, sometimes. Cars have more than 4. No, just like normal cars. Like you just gotta. Right, Mr. Bean's car. The what are they? Robins? Is that yeah? Okay. What else could a car have? Engine. What would the value for engine be? V8. Yeah, it's like the engine that we run JavaScript. JavaScript engine. Okay, what else? The car have doors. That could be like a boolean, right? Like yes, it has doors. Oh wait, I forgot the car. Nah, I like the boolean. What else? Barcode doors. What else does the car have? Windows. Like 7. And that's good enough. Everyone happy with our car? It has 7 windows, it does have doors, the car engine is V8, and the tires are all season. Got a lot of primitives there, yeah. So, like I said, we can represent all of our data using primitive values. We don't need anything more than that to represent our data. Cool, right? Fine. If we wanted to create another car, I could, you know, be like car 2, and then add some more data for that specific car, and keep going down this route where we create variables for every piece of data we want to represent. And this is kind of one of the problems that data structures solve. Instead of just having variables at the highest level that represent each individual thing, we want a nicer way of organizing this data, organizing, retrieving, storing this data. So instead, we're going to use objects. So I'm going to delete this car too. And we are just going to create a car, which is an object. And if I took this exact same data and put it in here, I got to replace the replace the equal sign with a colon, and replace all. That's not going to work nicely for me. Almost. No. Replace all of the semicolons with commas. So a couple of syntax changes, and we kind of almost on the right. Almost there. Also going to change these from lowercase to, or uppercase to lowercase. So, see if I know my keyboard shortcuts. Yes. Okay. So the exact same data, but represented with a data structure, this car object, instead of just using a bunch of variables. Does that make sense? Or any questions? That's how I'd make car 2. The nice thing here is if I have the object, when I access the different variable, the different values, which I want to throw around different terminology that you will hear. So we call them values. These are also called properties. So keys, values, or properties, whatever. When we go to access the properties on the car, it'll always be the same. So given any car, you know that car has tires. You know that car has an engine. You know that car has doors. We just have different sets of cars that all kind of have that little bit of data in them. So, I guess they're identical right now. 5 doors, false. Kind of like Dukes of Hazzard, right? They have to go through the window. Yeah. Yeah, they got 5. They can choose any window. Okay. Victoria's thumbs up in. So, yeah. Any questions? So I want to point out that I said the value or the keys have to be strings, but I have not made these keys strings. So, they could be in quotes.
Does it assume that they are strings if you don't put them in?
Yeah, they have to be strings. But what we can do is if the key is a valid identifier, we don't have to put the quotes around it. It's still a string. It's still a string. The key in the object is still a string. But we don't have to put quotes around it if it's a valid identifier. What is a valid identifier?
Aren't there kind of preset ones that are really commonly used?
Um,
The ones that you can just set into a new object.
what do you mean?
Well, I know that you can create like new objects and then you can create all of the properties and then you can like fill it. I've tried to do that before.
I know what you're talking about. I don't think that's what we're talking about with valid identifiers.
Okay. This is what it is. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
No. That's not a bad guess. Is it that it's unique? It's not. They don't have to be unique. They probably should be unique within the object, but they don't necessarily have to be. Actually, we should talk about that. Before we get into valid identifiers, yeah, each of these should be unique, just as when we create a variable, each variable name should be unique. What happens if we create a variable and then recreate that variable later on?
Well, if you go var, like, building, then it's local to that.
Right.
So it's a string.
But if you yeah, so it'll be within that scope, but if you create the variable with this value and then you create the variable again with a different value, I think it should just override it, right? Or am I wrong there? Will it throw an error? Hold on, let me test this out. Var thing equals hi, var thing equals world. Oh yeah, okay. So you just overrode, that's what I wanted to happen, the first value there. So,
That's just me. Sorry.
right, thank you. People answering in different ways. Oh, YYJ. I was gonna pronounce that like Yidge. Anyway, I forgot what my question was now. Oh, right, yeah. So when you define a variable, then you define it again. You're just gonna override the initial one. So if I had like engine v8, and then I also somewhere else in the object set engine to be like, what would be a better value for an engine? Or like, you know, what if the engine's just undefined? Just not going to define an engine. But now this car, even though it had an engine that was V8, it now has an engine that's undefined. So there will only be unique values or unique keys in an object. That's an important differentiation. There will only be unique keys in an object. So this car will only have one single engine key. And if we do something like this, the final, read top to bottom, the final value that we set will be the value. But that's fine. It doesn't have to be unique. That's totally legal JavaScript. But yeah, so let's come back to what is a valid identifier. A valid identifier in JavaScript, you probably know it, you know them well as anything that you could name a variable. Right? So if I say var name equals Sam, name is a valid identifier, right? Something like name1 is a valid identifier. Something like onename1 is not a valid identifier, because valid identifiers cannot start with a number. There are certain rules, right? So anything that is a valid identifier, we don't need to put strings around, but anything that isn't, we would have to put a string around. So if I wanted this to be the key in my object, I'd have to put a string around it. Or I'd have to put quotes around it to make it a string. Yeah. So let's actually look. Maybe MDN has a good one. Variable name validator. I'm just going to bring up some of these. There's some fun ones. All right, yeah, this is good. This is a fun web page. Wondering if you can use a given string as a variable name in JavaScript. Enter the variable name here and it will tell you. So if I put in something like 1, 2, 3, right, that's not a valid variable name, but what I just said, right, that's fine. But it has this funny one as its default one. This is a valid identifier in JavaScript. So you are allowed to What would the value for that be? I'm just going to set it to be itself. So now every time like I represent, I can console, right? So our cars could have, I don't know, this 3 characters. I don't know what they represent, or what they like. Sometimes you see Japanese characters or something used for things. I have no idea what these are, if they're a different language or what. With an underscore in the middle, so yeah. We could have that. That is a valid identifier. But if we put a number at the beginning, no longer a valid identifier, we'd have to put quotes around this whole thing. Okay. General rule, if something is a valid identifier, don't put the quotes around it. Only when something isn't a valid identifier, put the quotes around it. So usually when you see objects created, you won't see the quotes around the keys, although the keys are strings. Okay. Yo.
Why?
Why what?
Why would we not put quotes around it if it's a valid identifier?
Because it makes it less code to write and it looks a little bit cleaner, and that is the motivation behind a lot of conventions in programming. Yeah?
Are you like basically encouraging valid identifiers?
Yeah.
Is it all possible? Like try not to use?
Most of the time you'll find valid identifiers are what you need, right? When you're trying to create a variable, when was the last time you really needed like a number at the beginning or something? You'll find it'll be an edge case when you don't need valid identifiers. Like if you're trying to represent IDs for certain objects, like if you're in a database or something that's a JavaScript database, then you might need strings around it. Just for the most part, you'll find that all you need are valid identifiers. And for anyone that's ever played around with jQuery, $sign is also a valid identifier that we can set to something. Anyway, yeah, any questions? Cool, so I assume Victoria is fine if they're not asking. They're either getting everything or just so confused they don't know what to ask. Okay, so let's try accessing some of these values. Let's say I wanted to console log the first car's windows. I know if I wanted to console log a variable, I would just console log that variable, right? Car windows. What if I want to access the value of windows on this car object? How do I console log that? So I'm going to bring this up here so we can see it all together. So one guess was car : windows. I like that guess. JavaScript doesn't, but I do. That is not the way we do it. Like a comma? So it's like this. Had one. But who said something about quotations? Okay, what do I do if it's quotations?
What's that?
What were you saying about quotations?
I can't remember, it's been a while.
So some people saying mixtures of all different kinds of stuff like this. Yeah, the general idea is right, though. You want to access the Windows property, the Windows key on the car object. Victoria is suggesting square brackets, yeah. So the two ways that we are going to access values from objects is using the dot syntax right here and the square bracket syntax, which looks like that. These are the two ways right here, lines 16 and 17. They both work equally. They both do the same thing. Which one do you think you should use? The first one. Why should you use the first one? And it's a little bit less code, right? There's 2 less characters. Yeah. So when should you use the second one? Well, only when you have to. And you will find situations where you have to use this type of syntax. The difference being the dot notation, the thing to the right of it is just the valid identifier. And if we have that and we know what it is, we can just use dot notation like this. Sometimes we won't have a valid identifier, or we'll only know the key as a string value, because it'll be stored in a variable. Something we'll look at an example of this later. So we need to use square brackets because it happens to be a string, or because it's not a valid identifier for some other reason. When we're forced into that situation, square brackets. Otherwise, dot notation. Let's actually run this code and make sure everything works. Different circumstances? I don't know how to answer that question. Sorry, Gabe.
Are you talking about That's my guess, anyways.
Oh, okay.
Under different circumstances.
He's typing. He's going to clear that up. Under different circumstances, yes. In this situation, we would use the dot notation. What you just said, never mind. Oh, okay, yeah. Cool. Exactly. Exactly, Gabe, you get it. So let's run this code. What did I call this file? Objects, I think? Yeah. Node objects. Why is that showing up like that? So there's another fun thing. When you try to access a key on an object that doesn't exist, you're going to get undefined. So it's obviously Windows, not window. When I tried to access window, it gave me undefined. So it won't throw an error, nothing crazy will happen. It will just say it's undefined because you just haven't defined a value for that property. That's fine. But if I change this to Windows, and I'm going to get rid of this first one, we should now just see 77. Right, the exact same. They do the exact same thing. Okay, any questions? No? Victoria's good? Everyone's good? Okay. So let's actually experiment with this a little bit more. This is how we know we would console log out a value if we knew exactly what the property name was. Let's say, and this is a little bit contrived, but let's say we had an example where our property name was a variable. It was coming from somewhere else. It was a little bit more dynamic for whatever reason. So I'm just going to call this a variable property name. We're going to set this. Which property do we want? Tires. How can I console log the car's property name, or the value for whatever the property name is there? Like I'm using this variable to access the value. And the value, the value of this variable is tires, so I'm going to end up console logging the tires, yeah.
My guess would be just to give period property name, because property name equals tire.
Yeah, right, like that might be something that you'd want to do.
Might be better to use square brackets, because tires well,
So kind of, we have like kind of two options. I guess we have three options really. I'm going to show you all of them. Yeah. Okay, we have like, based on what I've shown you so far, these would all be natural things that you might want to do. Do I need to include, what do you mean? So the question was, how does this become a property of car? This doesn't become the property of car. Car has its properties, whatever. Like, you know, tires, engine, doors, window, engine again. This is just a variable that has the value of one of those properties. These aren't linked to each other in any way. I'm just creating a string for that so that we can then access property from an object later on given that string. Make a little bit more sense later on. Brackets are, but we can't use tires because we have to use this variable. That's the restriction I've placed on. Okay, one of these console logs will work the way we want it to, and two will not. Can anyone guess which one will work and which ones won't? We'll get two undefineds and one all season. All right, think about it. I'm going to run the code. Think about which one, the first, second, or third one you think is going to be correct. So the second one is the correct way of doing it. So let's see what JavaScript is going to do when we try the first and third one. If we try to access .propertyName on car, it's literally going to go to car and be like, hey, do you have a property called propertyName, and does it have a value? Right? And the object's going to be like, no, I don't, so it's undefined. The third one is the exact same thing, right? The exact same thing. This and this are identical in behavior. The middle one, however, will ask the car if it has the property name with whatever string value we have here. And using a variable that's value is a string is basically the same thing as inserting the string right there. Those are pretty much the same thing. So if we happen to have the property name as a string that exists on a variable, we don't want to end up asking the object for the variable name. We want to ask the object for the property that has the value of the variable name. I hate when things get a little bit too wordy. But this. So this is something, definitely an issue that everyone runs into in JavaScript when trying to access values on an object. So if you're finding that you're trying to access a property, it's coming up undefined, think back to this and see if you're actually accessing it correctly. What's up? No, this is, it was a joke. It's the Vancouver way of, because you know when you go to like get milk and it's not real milk, it's like nut milk and they spell it with a Y. So they're not real tires, they're vegan, gluten-free tires. Yeah, yeah. So you spell it with a Y. Okay. Does anyone have any questions about accessing values on an object?
If you want to add a property with a value to an object, you do it that way, have a value, or have a variable with a value. Now that's square brackets. Are there other ways of doing that? Adding. As opposed to just putting in a variable with a value, manually code it, like a new property with a new value, and have that insert.
Oh, so you're talking about actually adding data to the object instead of just reading data from the object?
That's what that's doing, the middle one there. No, like it's adding.
No, that's just accessing the existing property. These are all just reading data from the car. We've never actually updated the car.
But it's that, because that variable's outside of the object,
Uh-huh.
is it not putting it into the object, or is it
No, so none of this is putting any data into the object. This has nothing to do with the object. This is just a variable that's value happens to be the string tires. So, I mean, we don't even need that property name. We could just hard code in the value there.
So the tire is being pulled from the object.
Yeah.
Inside the variable is the variable is being pulled from, which is from the object. Right.
Basically, yeah. So we go to car and we ask if we can read one of its properties. In this case, we're asking to read the property name. In this case, we're asking to read the property tires, which is this one. And in this case, again, we're asking to read the property name. This is all just reading from the object, though. Looking at the object, seeing if it has a thing, and taking that value and console logging in this case. We don't have time. Okay, real quick, we will look at how to update an object, and then we'll take a break. This is how I read values. Dot, syntax, or square bracket. How would I add a value to a car? Let's say, what does this car need? What does this car not already have? Seats and a steering wheel. Okay. So I want to add seats and a steering wheel. What would the value for seats be? Leather. Sorry. And what would the steering wheel? What would the steering wheel be? Fuzzy, round. Fuzzy. Okay, so these are the values. I want steering wheel's value to be leather. Nope, seat's value to be leather. Steering wheel's value to be fuzzy. How do I mutate the car right now? How do I manipulate the values in the car to add these in after this object's already been created? Yeah.
Didn't they put it the same way that you called it? I don't know exactly what you said, but wouldn't you say like car dot equals litter?
Leather. Car dot seats equals leather.
Something like that. Like,
Yeah.
that's not the right bracket, I don't know.
Or car. What was the other one? Steering wheel. Steering wheel. What? That's. Thank you. Are there any people from England here? No, so I can get away with saying that this is like English spelling. All right, this is English spelling. So yeah, I can do it like this, dot notation. If it's a valid identifier, again, I just access the key using the dot notation. In this case, I'm not actually reading the value, I'm setting the value. That equal sign says I'm assigning this to be this value. Again, if it's not a valid identifier, I can use a string. And this is not a valid identifier because I put a space there, which is probably not a good thing to do. Usually you'll make it a valid identifier and do something like this. But yeah. So reading and writing, pretty similar. Just kind of like with a variable, right? If you want to read it, you just read it. If you want to assign a value to it, you do the variable name equals whatever value you want. Any questions? Yeah. It's the same as variables. So, oh right, yeah. So sorry, I'm in the wrong language. That would be the case. Yep. In JavaScript, this is the case. In something like Ruby, you would do underscores. It's just whatever the language conventions are for things like variable naming. Yeah, are usually the same for functions and property names. Yeah, cool. Yep.
So, what if we wanted to replace, say, the value for doors
How do you think you'd replace the value for doors?
the same way?
Car.doors equals false. 5 as a string, just for the sake of it.
Okay. So it'll always just create or replace if it already exists. That's property.
Yeah. If it already exists, it gets replaced. If it doesn't exist, it gets created. Yeah. Yeah. So the value of doors at this point will be whatever, like, you know, line 18 will be whatever the last value was set on doors. In this case, happens to be an empty array. So right here, doors is true. Right here, doors is an empty array. Yeah. How do you add more than one value to a key? That is a similar to question to how do I add more than one value to a variable? So I have a variable, I can only add one value to it, right? Unless I use a data structure. Yeah. An array or an object, right? They can be arrays, objects, functions, whatever you want. So if I wanted multiple values, I'll just do an array for this case. Yeah, I can now. That's how you add multiple values. Oh. Okay, so the question was, yeah, like how do you take the existing value and just kind of build upon that value or add more? No, you can't just do dot push because dot push only works on an array. So if I have doors, I don't know, you treat it just like any other variable, really. So if doors was currently a number, I could maybe like increment that number. If it was a string, I could maybe append to that string. But if you wanted to store multiple values, you'd probably initially start with it being a data structure. You know, here I'm going to create Windows as an object where the key is number, the value is 7, and that way next time I want to update Windows, I can just add data to the data structure. But it's kind of like asking, I have a variable and that has the number 5. How do I make it now have the number 5 and the number 7? Well, I guess you could like manipulate it in a way to add an array to it, or you could like increment it a bit, or... Yeah, if you're adding multiple values, most likely it's a data structure like an array or an object, and we'll definitely talk about nested objects when we get back from the break.
So if we were to update, if like Windows number, then it would be cars.windows.number equals.
Absolutely, yeah. So the
Just keep going as long as you know.
the question was, and we'll get more in depth to this when we start talking about nested objects in a moment. But yeah, like if you wanted to access the number of windows, it's an object within an object. So you go car dot windows dot number, and you can keep going forever. So you run out of RAM. But yeah, exactly. So, are there any other questions? Yeah. We can remove an existing key, but we're not going to talk about that today. For anyone interested, I'll just make a little thing like out of scope for today. But if you're interested, check out how to delete a key from an object. Is there a convention for, wait, is it the first one or the other one?
Yeah, very nice.
Ah, how common is it to put data structures inside properties? Very common. So how common would it be to have an object with a key and the value be another object or an array? Yeah, super common. And you can nest as far as you want to go. And in week 5, you'll learn a lot more about this too, and how you can use objects and nested objects to create other abstract data types like trees and graphs, which is way more computer sciencey than what we're talking about today. But yeah, common. It's however you need to represent your data, however makes sense, and a lot of the times putting objects inside objects and inside arrays and stuff just makes sense. Cool. All right, let's take a 10-minute break, and when we get back, we'll continue talking about nested objects. Oh, I guess I should change this. everyone back? Is everyone back now? Let's see, Victoria. Are you back? Sweet. Okay. Anyone think of any other questions during break? Cool. Two thermoses. One's got tea and one's got coffee, depending on my current mood in that minute. Feeling in a coffee mood. So let's talk more about nested objects. Let's create a new file, new things. We've done dogs, we've done cars. What should we do now? Yeah, new objects, new theme of the objects. Cats, sure, why not? Cats.js. How much time do we have? Okay, I'm gonna set this. I'm gonna set this up in a way that's kind of similar to one of your assignments today, because that'll just be fun. Cats equals this. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is create an object. And the outermost object will be a container for many other cat objects that could have other objects in them, that's fine. How would you identify a cat? Like in the real world, how would you identify? I mean, like, differentiate cats between each other. Damn it, I am bad at asking this question. Okay, so the answer I was looking for, and you guys can give, what's that? Nope. The answer I was looking for, and you can tell me what question I should have asked to get to this answer, was the name of the cat. We identify a cat by its name, like a person, the name, right? Yeah. No. The word name, yeah. So like. Yeah. Well, like, how would you, if we had 100 cats running around, how would you identify each individual cat? If I had like 30 students in a classroom, how would I identify each student? By name, yeah, probably, or like student ID if we had those. Do we have those? No, I don't think so. Okay, so we're gonna use name. Who's got a good name for a cat? Beans.
Or would that be named, not properly?
So this is how I want to set up these objects. So we're going to use beans as like, or the name as the identifier for each individual cat object, and then each individual cat can have a name, and so these will always match the name and the key. Always. Just give us a nice way of identifying it. So we can do a cats.beans. Like number of legs or something, which hopefully is 4. Let's do different. What do cats have? Cool. Stripes, like that could be a boolean. True. Okay, beans is stripy. Color. It's a good color for beans. Brown. Say age? Age. What's beans' age? 20 what? Who knows? Or it could be 20 weeks, 20 days, 20 years, maybe. I'm not gonna specify. I'm not gonna identify what that number means. Okay, that's pretty good. Let's do another cat. I'm just gonna copy and paste. Whoa, that's not what I wanted to copy. Who's got another cat name?
My cat's name is Sandwich. S-A-M-M-I-C-H.
Like that?
Yeah.
Cool. Name, Sandwich. What else we got? Stripes.
No.
False. False. Color. Brown. Age. 12. Nice. If people are making funny jokes in van, can they talk into the microphone? We like to laugh too. You know that means that if anyone tells a funny joke in Victoria, you'd have to record it and send it over to Vancouver so that we can hear it. Feel free to create a cat object, and I'll paste it into my cats. Any properties? Do we want to put an object inside of a cat? Like, what would a cat have many of or something?
Like
Personality.
personality. Or like when they went through vet last, like vet trip history.
Sure, so Sandwich, do we know this? Do we know vet trip history?
Yeah. Oh, last year. Wait,
So like last visit, like health is status.
how anxious was he?
Yeah.
Last year, anger level high. Let's do this as a number. What's the largest number you can have in JavaScript?
Oh.
Infinity. What's the smallest number you can have? Yeah, is that small or is that largely negative? Right? Like, yeah. Would small be 0? I don't know, it's getting mathy now. I just wanted to point out that infinity is a number. I think that's good enough. It demonstrates that we're having objects within objects within objects. Erin will try to share jokes. Absolutely no context, it's better that way. And we got a cat skiffy. Oh, you can make them bigger? This is what programming's all about. That looks is that just glasses on a cat? Yeah. The eyes look so weird. Anyway. Do we want to add another cat, or are we done with cats? Anyone got another cat name? Think you get the point, or should we add another cat name? Princess Peach. We'll only give Princess Peach a name. For brevity. You know, I like when people get the point, I like to, just take it one step further, really make it stale before we move on. So let's access some properties. Let's do that. How do I access Bean's age? I'm gonna console log it. Cats.beans.age. Cool. How do I access Sandwich's anger level after his last vet trip? Yeah. How do I add a color to Princess Peach? Nope. How do I access Princess Peach's color? Cool. Okay. Is everyone super comfortable with that at the speed we just went through, or does anyone want to go over any of that? No? Okay. Better run it in the terminal just to make sure. Node cats. The amount of times I've run node cats or node dogs is ridiculous. Students really love animals. Error messages are fun, aren't they? Because they tell you exactly what the issue is. You see an error message, you should get excited that you're using JavaScript and not a crappier language with crappier error messages, because it tells you exactly, here, there's an issue, cat is not defined, obviously, because cats. Anyway. Let's see, let's run it again. Cool. I don't remember. There's no context. So 20 infinity and white. Sounds about right, though, right? Okay, any questions? Gabe, cats. I don't know. I don't know what I asked, but the answer's... Oh, they're on top of this. Victoria's on top of it. Okay, any questions? Everyone comfortable with objects within objects within objects? Sweet. So add just one more thing. What would Princess Peach have many of? Many peaches. Okay, let's go personalities. Personalities. Start listing off some personalities. That's not how you spell personalities.
No.
It's the English spelling.
Hungry.
Okay. How do I access the second personality of Princess Peach? Someone that hasn't already Already gone. How do I access the second personality of Princess Peach? What's that? Square brackets 1 will go somewhere in here, but by itself it's just an array of 1.
Cats dot
Cats dot Princess
Princess Peach
Peach.
dot personality.
Personality. Yeah. Personalities. Oh, tites.
It's spelled the same way as mine.
Yeah.
The last T there is
Personalities.
That was actually
I like personalities. Okay, cool. Let's just make sure that works. Boom, done. Yep, needy. Cool. Okay, so there's nothing magical, nothing new or crazy going on here. It's just kind of combining knowledge that we already have, and that's it. Let's see. Rabies Boolean? Eyeglass?
They were making suggestions for people.
What's the lag on this? Because I asked for suggestions like 20 minutes ago. Come on.
I think they're all cat people. Apparently they keep them here because they're all cold.
Okay. Cold people run in slow motion, I get it. Okay. So, yeah. Does anyone have any questions about any of that? Nope, okay. So here's a fun thing. What if I wanted to, let's do something kind of simple. I want to log out the name of every single cat that exists. I probably have to have a couple of console log statements, but I want console log the name of every single cat.
Yes.
Yes.
I would say cat dot asterisk dot name.
Ooh, that's kind of cool. Cast.asterisks dot name.
Oh, it's a dollar sign. Because it's grabbing something from dollar.
Or like dollar sign or something. So asterisk is not correct. Dollar sign is also not correct, although it thinks it's valid. That's kind of like the idea we want, though, right? We want to go into the cats object. We want to take every single value there is and access the name on those. Oh, we would not use this. We will get to this in a moment, though. But yeah, we can't do this. This kind of thing does not exist in JavaScript. That would be somewhat magical. No, we cannot. Like, this is only one single. Like, this will ask cats for the cat with the name dollar sign, and then print out that one. We have to be a little bit more manual, a little bit more intentional with what we're doing here. Yeah. So maybe a for loop, right? That would kind of make sense. If this cat was actually an array and not an object, we know we could just loop through each cat that exists in it. But because it's an object, how do we loop through all the values of an object? In this case, we want all of the values of the cat's object, because each value is a cat. Okay, so I got from the back of the room, for some variable in cats. Absolutely, you learned about scope yesterday. I just created a global variable. Now I haven't. What will that do? Sorry, Victoria. What is, okay, so this is definitely a way of iterating through every single value in an object. Well, it's a tool that we can use to iterate through every value in an object, but what's going on here? What is some variable? What's going to happen? Okay, so one person wants to try some variable.name. So you're implying that if I do this, then basically I'm getting each cat out of cats, right? Because then I can console log cat.name. So if I do a for in, I actually get each value from the object. Is that right? I mean, if you look at it in plain English, it kind of makes sense. Like cats.name here? Oh, cats. No, that would look for name on the cats object, and there is no name. There is no cat with a name. Remember, yeah, there's no special things going on here. If we use dot notation, it's literally going to look for the value that has the property name. Cats. So let's just see what happens here. If I run this bunch of undefines, I should comment out the other ones. Because these are cool things to notice, cool debugging processes here. If I console log out, if I do a for var cat in cats and console log what we think will work cat.name, I get undefined. How many times do I get undefined? How many cats exist in my cats object? Okay, so something right is going on, but not the thing we wanted to happen. So what is actually going on, and how do I figure out what's going on? How do I fix it? If I do cats.name, exact same thing. Not a bad guess. I have a question. What is cat, right? We assumed that it was the object, right? The value in this case. Well, all right, let's verify that. Let's console log cat and see what's happening. Yeah, that's the key. So when we do for in, when we use a for in loop on an object, we get its key. So I'm going to rename this to key. So let's make a note of that, for in. The syntax for a for in loop when we have an object, say we have an object, obj, we will go for var key in obj. Well, that's kind of handy. So we can loop through all the keys. We can't loop through all the values, but we can loop through all the keys. Given the key to an object, or given all of the keys for an object, how do I access the value?
Can you say if the key is name?
Well, so it's not that we can ask if the key is a name, because the keys are going to be these three keys that we specified to be whatever we wanted. We need to go in another level. Do we need another for in loop? Okay, so here we go. That's not a bad guess. Cats.key.name, right? We know that we're looping through each time. We get 3 iterations. We know that on each iteration, key is going to be the key. We know that to access the value, we need to use the key, and we know that once we access the value, we have a cat object that we can call .name on. Right, similar to what we've been doing up here, just a little bit more dynamics. We're throwing it in a for loop. We don't have to know what the cat's name is first. We're just going to loop through all of them and perform this. If I use dot notation like this, what issue am I going to run into in this case? Let's first run it. Cannot read property name of undefined. So this idea is right. Everyone who thought this looked good, it's the right idea, but the syntax is wrong. What is wrong with this? Why can I not use dot notation here? And what do I use instead? If I can't use dot notation, yeah, I'd have to use square brackets, but why? Key is a variable name that's value is a string that represents one of the keys in the cats object. When we did this earlier and it was a little bit contrived, right here, it's the exact same thing. The property name is actually a string assigned to a variable, so we have to do it this way, the middle way. And this is what happens when we loop through all the keys in an object. The for loop will look like this, var key in whatever object, and then in order to access one of the values, I have to take the variable, pass it to, or use it to access the value from the object, and then I can use dot notation after that if I know which properties I want to access. I prefer to write it this way, break it apart into multiple steps so that your code reads a lot nicer. So I'll create an actual cat object, because I know that each individual value is a cat object, and I'm going to say that equals cat's key. Now if I want to console log a cat's name, I can just do that. This isn't that difficult to read. Let's loop through all the keys in the cat's object. Let's grab the value for each key, so there'll be each cat, and then access whatever property we want on the cat. In this case, the name. So let's log it out. Yep, square brackets. And there we go. There's the name. Let's log something else. So we already know we can get the cat's name. Let's console log the cat's. What should we console log the cat's? I don't know. Age. Age. Let's make a nice sentence out of it. Console log cat.name age is cat.age. There we go. Bean's age is 20, Sandwich's age is 12, Princess Peach's age is undefined. Any questions? Yes.
You don't ask the princess her age.
Apparently, you get defined, undefined. Be explicit. Ooh, you know what's fun? Because we have emojis, and emojis definitely work in JavaScript. Right? It's not rude, it's an emoji. So yeah, we can loop through. Actually, I'll write a very generic version of this. So let's say things. For key in things, var thing equals things key, and then you can do whatever you want. This is going to be a pretty common syntax when you need to loop through all the values in an object. You first loop through the keys, and then you use the keys to access the value, and then you can do, thing dot whatever property. You will have a lot of practice with this today. Okay, so one question was, can we use a for of loop? For of is an ES6 thing, and we'll be learning more about ES6 next week. For of works fine with arrays. I'm going to put this out of scope. For of works fine with arrays, but you have to do a lot of extra setup with generators and iterators for it to work with custom objects. If anyone gets done with all the work and is super interested, you can kind of Google that and see where it takes you. But you will notice next week you can use for of on arrays. They don't quite work on objects unless you do stuff. Yeah, not a bad question. Has anyone used for in on an array? No? Alright. For in works on arrays too. I'll actually just do this in the node REPL after this. You don't ask a princess, right? So if I have an array of just like, I don't know, random numbers, I can do a for in on the array. What's the key going to be in this case? Won't be each item, it'll be each index. Works same on an array except yeah, right, instead of having, cause that's basically what an array is. It's an object where the keys are indexes. Yeah. So you'll see for in used on an array, it works the exact same way, it's just you get the index out. Okay. So let's see how we're doing. Nested objects, won't go arrays of objects. We did for in. That's a lot of what you're going to be doing today with some of the assignments is nested objects and using for in and stuff. So does everyone feel comfortable with nested objects? And then if you have to, using for in. You won't use for in on an object much unless you really need to iterate through every single value, which is not the most common thing to do, but does happen. You're more likely going to be just accessing like dot syntax, kind of like this stuff. But occasionally you do need to loop through things. Okay, so one final thing before we end. We are going to talk about methods and a little bit about this. What's a method? Anyone know what a method is? I know, it's 10:30. I've been talking for like an hour and a half. It's a function, exactly. It's a function. Okay, toString is an example of one. Dot length, I believe, is actually just a property. That's yeah, toString is an example. Oh yeah, that's actually a great definition. Dot word bracket. The dot implies that the thing to the left of it is an object. We use dot notation with objects. The word will be the function name, and the bracket defines that it's actually a function, right? So a method is a function that is a property of an object. Or that we access as a property on an object. Well, that means we create an object and the value is a function. We give that function a special name. It's called a method. Acts the same way as normal functions do for the most part. So let's just look at an example of this. Let's create a new object, just a simple one to look at methods. We've done cats, dogs, cars. Coffee? Call it Starbucks. Starbucks or coffee? Which one's better? I don't know, Starbucks gives you more like... Oh, now I'm torn. Alright, raise your hand for Starbucks. Ooh, maybe tea. Alright, let's go with Victoria because we haven't had many suggestions from them yet. Okay, var t. What does t have? Leaves. What are leaves? True. Tea leaves. But what else? Tea has water. What's the value? True. Hot. Yeah, let's go with hot. What else? Quantity 5. Milk. True or false? False. Okay, cool. Looks good. Object. Key value pairs. Keys are valid identifiers in this case. Could be a string. Values are whatever value we want. This is storing data. It's just data. This is the state of the T. But I want to attach some behavior to the T. I want the T to be able to do things. How do we define behavior in JavaScript? Variables are for the data. If we want behavior, we have functions. Exactly. What might T do? Get drank. Sure, why not, right? And what happens to T when it gets drank? Quantity goes down. That's perfect. I love it. So let's see, like T.quantity decrements or something, right? This is now behavior. But instead of having this function just out in the open floating around, what we can do is actually attach it to the object as a value. So I'll have a getDrank key that's value is a function. And it will decrement the T value, right? So this is nice because I can come in here and just say T.getDrank. There it is. That's a method. Something crazy going on. It's just a function that now exists as a value on the object. Yeah, go ahead.
So when you call that function there, T.getDrank, will the quantity will go down by 1?
Well, let's test that out. So here we're going to go console log quantity, whatever, T.quantity, and then we'll quantity. So what do we expect it to be? First it will be 5, and then, yeah, hopefully.
That's just me repeating my question.
So let's, each time it gets called, yeah. Because I was consistent with my typo. Yeah, exactly. So this is a nice way of attaching the behavior to the data structure, right? We use methods. One convention and kind of a handy thing that we like to do is instead of referring to the object within itself, we use this. Always use this to refer to the current object when you're inside a method. and I'll write that here. Always use this to refer to the current object from inside the method. This is out of scope, basically, because this is a very powerful and very, at times, misleading thing, and you will find that out in a lot of detail in week 6. But for now, we're just going to use this to refer to the current object from where we're calling the method. Kind of giving you that heads up because you will have readings where people talk about this being a crazy, difficult thing. You'll hear mentors talk about it. It is a very, very big, powerful thing that can be misleading and confusing. Doesn't have to be, but it is a lot of the time. If we're just using it in this way, this just refers to the current object. Makes it really easy to write. You shouldn't. For reasons that are hard to explain without getting into depth about this.
Okay, so there's obviously a big difference as to why we're using this.
Yeah, I mean, one thing like what if I change this to T1 and now I have to go to every single method and change it to like be that, right? There is. Yeah, there are more examples I don't want to go down because, but at the very least for that reason, you will find that as you get more experience with JavaScript, there are many, many, many more reasons why you would use this or not use this in some cases. But for now, just if you're referring to the current object within a method, this. All right, what other behavior? Let's just add another thing. What other behavior could we add to T? Spill is a function that console logs. Is there a spill T? There's a teacup. Is there a spill? There's a spiral notepad. Spiderweb? Good enough. This is whatever. Yeah, so here's another example, right? It's a method, so we say t.spill. That's just how we access a value. But it's a function, it's a method, so we parentheses. Calling it a function is totally fine. Calling it a method is just being a little bit more specific. It's a function that just happens to exist on an object. Yeah.
Okay, that just, it's just inconsistent, like console log, heat quantity doesn't have the, doesn't have the, oh, I see, oh, I see, decline is not a function. You have to keep the bracket there.
So it's a function, like, yeah, so this is a function. Exactly. So this function isn't actually doing anything to the T.
Right, yes, no, I see that. I just was confused because I thought T dot quantity and then I thought it was
Okay. We could, I guess, what? Yeah, okay, spill. This dot quantity should be 0, I guess, now? Yeah. Yeah. So we can do all this stuff. We can do, we can put as much logic in here as we want. We could say get drank, like if this dot quantity is greater than 0, then we'll decrement it. Else, like what happens if you try to drink a tea that's already finished?
Or like console log, get more tea.
Console log get more tea. Throw. There's no throw emoji. Whatever. Get more tea. Boom. Done. Now, okay, yeah, no, this is cool. Let's try this. So what we're gonna do is a set interval. Console log the quantity, and then we're gonna tell key to get t to get drank every second. So every second the tea is going to get drank, so we'll see that it like goes from 5 to 4 to 3, 2, and then hopefully it will say get more tea. That'll be fun. Does anyone use set interval? Yeah. Don't worry about the syntax too much. If it's confusing, you'll learn more about that later on. Let's see, it just allows you to, quantity 5, 4, it's getting drank, 3. Way, look at that. Quantity 0, get more tea.
It's gonna go forever now.
It's going to go forever now. or until I hit Control C.
Question from Victoria. For line 10, do you have to name the function bracket? Should it name something else such that change passing arguments into it at all?
Good question. I'm not naming the function. The name is the thing to the left. The key is the name. So key : value. The key is get drank, the key is spill, the key can be any key I want it to be. The value is a function, so yeah, I have to write function.
This is calling a method, so when you have boundaries
Oh yeah, so you could have parameters here. It's just like any other function that you'd create. Have you ever created a function with var, right? Like var sum func equals function, right? Exactly the same as that. Except instead of var and this and the equal sign, you change that with a colon, put it in an object. But yeah, you could have parameters. We could like get drank, and we could have a quantity that has like a default value that is 1, but we could set it to be whatever we want. So this dot quantity minus equals whatever quantity we pass in, and we could actually like get drank. We're only going to drink half a cup each time. Did I do that right? Yeah.
I'm just wondering, because quantity is already defined within the object, and now we're defining it in a local scope inside the object.
Great question, yeah. So the question was, quantity is defined on the object, but now we're also kind of defining it on local scope. So when I access quantity within the function, it's going to be the one that was passed in or whatever local variable I created. This dot quantity is the quantity that exists as a property on the object. Really good to differentiate between that. If it's a property on the object, this dot whatever, or object dot whatever. If it's just the local variable, you just access it like that. Two completely different things that can clearly exist together just fine.
I've never seen a parameter that like that before with a function.
Yes, I feel like this is an ES6 thing that I shouldn't have pointed out right now. It's just a default value. It means that if I didn't put a value in here, it's going to default to 1.
Okay, great.
It's, yeah. So it should still function the exact same way if I hadn't changed any other code. What happens if we put parameters? That was what we just went over. Cool. Okay, and then one other thing to build on Sammy's question is that you will see as an ES6 thing, like, I don't know, whatever, some method. What else does a T do? Get spilled, get drank, burn you. Burn you. It can now be written like this. So if you see this as an example somewhere, don't think it's crazy or anything. It's the equivalent of this. Just newer JavaScript allows you to write it this way. So you might see it. But it's the same as this. It is the key is burn you, the value is a function. Yes. Any other questions? Oh yeah, about the equal sign, the parameter, yeah. Cool. That's everything I wanted to go over. So are there any other questions? Yeah.
What is your opinion on
I don't have an opinion. Sometimes I hang them, sometimes I don't. I think you're talking about this, right?
Yeah.
Be consistent with whatever you do. When there's a convention and you don't know what the best practice is, should you put a comma on the last value? Do you have an opinion on this or not? Just be consistent and you'll be fine. So if you're always leaving a comma on the last one, always do that. And if you're not, don't, yeah. Don looks like he has an opinion though.
I have an opinion on hanging commas. Hanging commas in code are not like the Oxford comma. The Oxford comma can actually change.
Oh, wait. Sorry.
Oh, yes. So it's not like the Oxford comma where it can actually change the syntax of the code. It's a thing where if the style guide for the employer that you're working for or your senior dev, they say you need to use hanging commas and they're paying you, well then you use hanging commas. If it's something where it improves the clarity of your code for you, then use hanging commas. But like Sam said, just choose a style and be consistent. Because it's not going to actually change the functionality, it's entirely cosmetic. It does make it easier to go back and add more properties to objects later on, or add, there's a couple different places that you might use them. But yeah, it's entirely cosmetic. But just be consistent and follow whatever the style guide is for the employer that's actually giving you money to write code.
Yeah, that was a good answer. Yeah, a note about the employer thing and the style guide for whatever company you're working at. You might write the most perfect code ever, submit a pull request like it's ready to go and it has this new feature, and it might get denied because you didn't have that comma in there. So then you have to go back, add the comma, redo the pull request, and resubmit it. I think I tend to leave them off. I don't know why. Maybe it's because hanging commas are not valid JSON, but whatever. I don't have a good opinion.
Victoria just wants to know if the code examples will be in the notes.
Oh, absolutely. Everything that you see me type during a lecture will come at you within like 10 minutes of me finishing the lecture. All the code examples, all the misspelled notes, everything. That's a yes. Cool. Any other questions? No? All right, cool.